Good afternoon. I'd like to ask you all to join me, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Now I'd like to call on our new member, Brent Adams, who is the Senior Benefits Consultant with Hayes Companies, for our Rotary blessing this afternoon.
Good morning. This is titled The Invocation of the New Millennium. Let us invoke our ancestors, both spiritual and genetic, for we are the sole reason for their existence. Let us invoke the children and their children, for they are the sole reason for our existence. Let us invoke the mountains and rivers and this great earth, and acknowledge our intimacy and interdependence with all things, sentient and insentient. Let us reflect that the gift of life is more fragile than the dewdrops on the tips of the morning grasses. Then let us vow. Let us vow to heal and nourish. Let us vow to love and share. Let us vow to manifest peace and joy with wisdom and compassion. May this century be known to future generations as the beginning of the great millennium of endless spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Some great thoughts to kick off our lunch. Go ahead and enjoy your meals and your friends. I'd like to invite our Secretary, Brian Blankenberg, Senior Private Client Advisor and VP with Bank of the West, to give us this week's Secretary Report.
That's all right. Good morning. Only one announcement today. Just a reminder, Rotary Family Picnic at 4 Mile House will take place on Thursday, August 29th. Reservations are required by next Thursday. There will not be a regular club meeting on the 29th. Please sign up with Jamie at the door or reply to the email that was sent out. We have 2 birthitarians today. We have Peter Bose. And Jim McGibney. Happy birthday. 4 guests today. First guest is Jim Goddard's guest. Her name is Teresa Jensen. She works at 9 Health Fair as the Director of Education. Guest of Jim Wilkins, we have Tom Wolf, and he's the President at Iliff School of Theology. And we have a guest, Steve Wolf. He's the guest of Sue Fox and Steve Werner, and he's a tax attorney. And then we have the lovely Susan Sweeney as a guest of Tim Sweeney, and then Susan is Tim's wife. Welcome. One visiting Rotarian from the Denver Southeast Club, Steve Werner. All right, got 3 different jokes for us today. What do you get when you eat marijuana? Potbelly. What do you call a pothead that doesn't inhale? Mr. President. What do you call a person who remembers what they did at Woodstock? Liar. And our quote of the day, wisdom is the power to put our time and our knowledge to the proper use. And that's from Thomas Watson. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite our own Sergeant at Arms, Will Snyder, Trust and Investment Officer with A&B Bank, for a networking engagement moment.
Thank you, President Allison. How's everyone today? Good afternoon. Brian, you were a little late. It's afternoon, not morning, my dear friend. I was online looking into networking a little bit as we set up this year for Spotlight on Networking, and I was on a site called About.com on the human resources section of that site. And it had really an old school definition on there of what networking is, and that is, people at a social gathering and circulating around the room, handing out business cards. But what it really set up was the fact that the broader view of business and social networking is that it creates a pool of contacts in which you can draw leads, referrals, ideas, and information to progress your career or your personal life forward, your personal development forward. But the thing that really stood out on this is that, it talked about how you really need to start a network before you need it. But the other thing that stood out multiple times on this website that really amazed me was that successful people believe that their success is attributed to mutually beneficial relationships. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Mutually beneficial relationships. The other thing that it went into is to really provide some facts about how you can really network without ever leaving the seat in your office. And there were some really, really great statistics on here I wanted to share with you. There are more devices connected to the internet than there are people on the earth. Now, that isn't to say that everybody's on the internet at one time, but more devices connected. Out of the 6 billion some people on the planet, 4.8 billion have a mobile device, while only 4.2 billion people own a toothbrush. What is the work in Rotary all about? 91% of internet access is for social media. Facebook is the number one social marketing tool for brands at 83%, followed by Twitter, that's 53%. But here's the point. I don't know how other individuals manage their social networks, but I personally do not connect with people I don't know, haven't met, done business with, have a relationship with, whether that's on LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever other piece of social media I used. So where do you meet those people that you need to have for a network before you need it? Look around, folks. They're all right here. Everything you need is right here. And if it's not here, someone here knows someone that can get you connected with that. 2 things to keep in mind coming up. Young and Carolyn Show having a garden party on the 7th of September. 100 people is the max that can attend. I think we're already over 50 RSVPs, so that's a great way to come out and network a little bit. And one more thing real quick before I'm done today. Buy peaches, sell peaches, gift peaches. Peach Day's coming up on 8/31, another great way to come out and network. Come early, stay late, wear the pin, get plugged in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will. Now I'd like to invite our membership chair, Mark Donovan, paralegal with Wade, Ash, Woods, Hill, and Farley, for a membership moment.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, President Allison, and good day, fellow Rotarians. I'll be real politically correct about that. Surveys show that the most effective recruiting strategy is very simple. It is to be asked by another Rotarian. Our mission as Rotarians is to strengthen and grow Club 31 simply by asking. This is up to you, everyone in the room. We know from President Allison the time to recruit is right now. The one and only mission of your membership committee is to make your recruiting as simple as it can be. When a friend of yours crosses your mind who exemplifies the traits and characteristics of a great Rotarian, just email me with his or her name and contact information, and we'll just help you follow up. We'll CC you on the emails that are going back and forth. As many of you have today, when you bring a guest to one of our meetings or any of our events, just let us know that that person's here. Drop by the membership table, grab any of us on the membership team, and say, hey, I'd like to introduce my friend. Again, we'll help you follow up with that person. We'll help to ease your friend's transition into becoming the great Rotarian that they are. Recruiting is up to you. The time to recruit is now. Membership team's sole responsibility is to make your recruiting as simple as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You are doing a great job, you and your team. Next, I'd like to invite Rich Spong, Chair of the RI Foundation Support Committee, and our DRCF President, Lucius Ashby, owner-partner with Jackson Ashby Goldstein PC, for a peach sale announcement. And the hype I've gotten is this is going to be really fun.
Thank you, Alison. As everyone knows, been said several times, the sale and the deadline to order your peaches is fast approaching.
The deadline for entering your orders is August 23rd. That's next Friday.
And the pickup date is Saturday, August 31st, over at the Denver Center International over on 6th Avenue. It's a fun time. You can even have breakfast over there with some peaches.
Yes. We can arrange to deliver the peaches to you if you're not able to pick them up on that date.
Okay, and the peach sale, as you know, is one of the two major fundraisers that the Rotary Club has each year.
The net proceeds of the sale benefit the Denver Rotary Club Foundation and the Rotary Foundation of Denver International, of Rotary International.
Last year, the foundation receives $9,136 from the peach sale. That was the net that went to our foundation.
Over the past 9 years, we have sold 250,000 pounds of peaches.
And we received gross profits of about $133,000, and about $4,500 is going to the DCIS Interact Club as their share of the profits of the sales.
The price of a box of peaches is only $35, and you can enter your order online, and we encourage you to have those that you sell the peaches to make their order online to save time for everyone, and it's easy to do that. I even was able to do it.
Okay. These peaches are picked one day, trucked overnight, and delivered to us the next day as a purchaser. So I can say that they're fresh and good. They've always been very, very, very good.
Being so fresh, these peaches are delicious, and if you cannot eat them all right away, you can make them into pies, you can freeze them, and if you talk to other Rotarians, they can give you lots of other ways that you can use the peaches.
So tell your friends this is a great opportunity to encourage them to place their orders, and they can place their orders online at the Rotary website.
Some Rotarians have used the peaches as gifts for their good customers or clients, and others have found family, friends, and neighbors are very eager to get the peaches that they have when they order them.
Thus, you can be kind to your friends and give them away, and the profits from the sale will benefit the Rotary Club and the Rotary Foundation.
We could make another whole presentation about the wonderful things that the two foundations do for the fulfillment of our mission of service above self, but we don't have time today.
So I'm asking you all to place your orders, not only your orders, but your friends' orders, your neighbors' orders, and like a friend of mine was out around in his neighborhood getting orders for peaches.
Tell others of the opportunity to purchase these very fresh and delicious peaches. And remember, the deadline for ordering is next Friday.
Okay.
Lucius, you even wore an orange shirt in celebration of peaches. So, next, I'd like to invite Melly Kennard, owner of Get Organized, to introduce our program speaker today, Dr. Christian Thurston.
Well, thanks to to member John Wilson's wife. I have had the privilege of listening to Dr. Christian Thurston, and I thought he is too good to pass up. And I'm most appreciative that he's here today because we have a complex issue about marijuana. And Dr. Thurston attended the University of Chicago School of Medicine. He did his residency at Northwestern. He's passionate about what he does. He's very, very hardworking. And very few people can say that they have 3 board-certified specialties. His are general, child, adolescent, addiction, and psychiatry. So he is also, his office is at Denver Health, and I'd like to have this very brief because I want him to spend the time speaking.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. And I changed I think the original title I put down was a little bit boring, and I couldn't resist the pun here, out of the haze, so bear with me on that. But thank you for having me. I'm Chris Thurston. I'm a child psychiatrist. I run the Adolescent Substance Treatment Program at Denver Health. I'm also part of an addiction research group at the University of Colorado. So I do research half-time, clinical work half-time. And when you work in adolescent addictions, 95% of our patients are referred for marijuana. And and in 2010, I wrote, just very innocently, I wrote a little perspectives piece for the Denver Post about how my young patients are using this high-grade medical marijuana, and it's really causing a lot of problems for them and for treatment, and it's making it a lot more difficult. And I published that very innocently in the Denver Post, and it kind of swept me up in this whole marijuana issue here. So here I am today to hopefully share some of my experience around this and what I've learned. So to start with then, let's see if the electronics work. Great. And I'm going to try to finish under our amount of time so we can have some time for questions afterwards, if that's okay with people. So first, I wanted to talk about why does marijuana matter? I mean, some people would say it doesn't cause any problems. There's no issue around this. So why is it a big deal from a public health perspective? And then what's a constructive response around this in terms of what's happening around us? So those are my 2 talking points today. And I'm a child psychiatrist, so we think developmentally. And so we think from pregnancy to latency age, which is around 8 years of age or so. I need to speak into the mic. Thank you. And then we talk about adulthood, and then we talk about adolescence and then adulthood. And so I'm going to go through developmentally what's the impact of marijuana across development like that. So just starting with pregnancy here, we know that some recent studies have come out following people for up to 14 years now who were exposed to marijuana in utero. And first trimester exposure to marijuana of up to 1 joint a day. And that's important that it's first trimester because that's when women are least likely to know that they're even pregnant. Is associated with an IQ point drop of 5 points at age 6. And then clearly associated with depression at age 10. And then hyperactivity, impulsivity, difficulty with concentration and learning in school. And then increases the odds of marijuana use by age 14. So not only do you really kind of take a hit from being exposed in utero, but then also you're more likely to use as an adolescent yourself and have those consequences. And then decreased school achievement at age 14. All predicted by exposure to marijuana in pregnancy. And current estimates are that about anywhere from 5 to 20% of women use marijuana in pregnancy. So I think that's low-hanging fruit that we need to kind of really get the word out there about that. And again, I'm not really a scaremonger or into scare tactics or anything like that. I think there's just some new data out there that we need to that people need to know about, and especially now with the commercialization of marijuana, we have a very powerful machine telling us the very pro side of it. Then there's the secondhand exposure, and there was an article, maybe you saw it in the paper, came out in JAMA, our most prestigious medical journal there is, of a case series at Children's Hospital, Colorado, showing 14 marijuana exposures in children less than 12 years of age since 2010, which is when this whole marijuana boom happened, and 0 before 2010. And of those, there were 4 children who needed to be admitted to the hospital, that the exposure was so significant medically that they needed to be admitted, and then 1 was admitted to the ICU. So when you say that it's not possible to overdose on marijuana, well, maybe that's true if you're an adult, but if you're a toddler or a child, then that's not the case. It can be quite serious medically. And we have no information on the impact of secondhand smoke yet. We know that the ingredients of marijuana smoke, the ingredients of tobacco smoke are highly similar, but we don't have the data yet to show us what the effect of secondhand smoke, marijuana smoke is, except to show that secondhand smoke does cause physiological effects, increased pulse, and some effects of intoxication in the secondhand exposed person. Then adolescents, this is what I see and what we deal with here, and we're just seeing an explosion of referrals to substance treatment. I'm going to show you the use rates among adolescents is really going up significantly. School expulsions for drug use, vast majority of which is marijuana, have gone up 40% since 2009. So this is where we're seeing, I think, the biggest impact, and it really is the peak prevalence of marijuana use is in adolescence. So when you say adult use marijuana, it's kind of an oxymoron because it's primarily adolescents who use marijuana. It's primarily adolescents because of their developing brains and bodies who suffer the consequences of marijuana use. 1 in 6 adolescents who uses marijuana goes on to develop an addiction to it. And so maybe we should stop there because there's no longer any scientific debate that it causes not just psychological addictive potential, but also physically addictive potential as well. And then if you wait till you're an adult to try it, about 1 in 9 will develop an addiction. So there's something about the developing brain we can get into later that's much more susceptible to becoming addicted to any substance, and marijuana included. Heavy marijuana exposure starting in adolescence predicts an 8-point drop in IQ from age 13 to 38. This was a wonderful study that came out this summer, and the lead authors were at Duke University, and it was a study that took place in New Zealand, and they followed over 1,000 consecutive births from birth until age 38 with a 90% follow-up rate, which is unheard of here in the United States. You could never do this study here. We move around too much. It would be too hard to keep track of us. But they did it in this little town, Dunedin, New Zealand, and they showed that those who were exposed to marijuana starting in their adolescence had up to an 8-point drop in their IQ. And of course, they controlled for all the possible confounds that they could in terms of socioeconomic status, educational achievement, other substance use, things like that. We can talk more about that, but it's kind of what you'd expect because the adolescent brain is undergoing enormous development, and the very receptor in the brain that marijuana binds to, it's called the CB1 receptor, is the receptor in the brain that helps control brain development. So it's really a double whammy. Here you have brain development happening big time in adolescence. The very receptor that helps control this brain development is the receptor that marijuana binds to. Also, this was a finding, the twofold increased risk of psychosis in adulthood with adolescent exposure to marijuana was first a Swedish study that came out. Over 60,000 Swedish soldiers were studied, and the results were published in 1988, finding that those Swedish soldiers who had been exposed to marijuana as adolescents had increased rates of psychosis. So that's like hearing things that aren't there, seeing things that aren't there. It's a symptom of schizophrenia. And we thought surely this is just some random finding, but that since then, 6 more large cohort studies with the same finding, ruling out 60 possible confounds, such as, well, maybe they had psychosis at the beginning, or maybe there were other substances involved. Still with the same finding here that adolescent exposure to marijuana predicts psychosis in young adulthood. But it's not just, let me do this. Oh, it's not just adolescents and children who, and at the beginning we invoke the children because they're the reason for our lives. And, and I think certainly there's a role for protecting the children from the marijuana issue right now. But I think adults also, too, can be adversely affected by this. So adults 1 in 9 will go on to develop addiction. And all of this research was done with the low-potency marijuana that used to be around in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Right now, that was 2 to 3% THC by weight. And now it's 20, 30 plus percent. THC by weight. So it's really 10 to 20 times more potent than what was used when we were younger. Chronic marijuana use causes cognitive impairment for up to 1 month. So various studies have had adults who are chronic users, put them in an inpatient unit, followed them for a month with sophisticated neuropsychological tests, and shown deficits in memory especially. Up to a month out, seems to normalize by about 3 months. But that's unique to marijuana. So somebody could get drunk tonight, but then tomorrow, be pretty intact, at least by the next day. But chronic heavy marijuana use can have subacute impacts that last for up to a month or so. And then chronic marijuana use causing psychomotor impairment for up to 3 weeks. So again, another study, chronic adult users, take them into an inpatient setting, give them some psychomotor tests that simulate driving and showing some impairment lasting up to 3 weeks compared to controls. So I think that's also something that's unique to marijuana. And so this is what we're seeing here. This is what we saw in tobacco. We've just lived through this nightmare of, 8 decades of this with tobacco in terms of really distorting the pros and cons. I mean, does anybody remember X cigarette is better for you than Y cigarette? And 9 out of 10 doctors agree that this cigarette is better for you than this cigarette. And no, cigarette smoke doesn't cause cancer. And no, secondhand smoke is not harmful to you. We've lived through that, and I think there are some parallels to what we're seeing now with marijuana, now that we've commercialized that, really talking about, medical marijuana and some exaggerations around its medicinal properties. And I'm not saying that it doesn't, it has no therapeutic value for anybody, but I'm saying there's some clear exaggerations around that. And then really marketing the product heavily, and especially marketing it to youth, because 1 in 6 adolescents becomes addicted to marijuana, whereas adults much less likely. We don't wake up in our 40s and 50s and say, we're going to become addicted today. It's something that has a pediatric onset. And so there's clear documentation from the tobacco settlement that youth were specifically targeted with their advertising to really develop the new users. Because why? Because 80% of tobacco alcohol company profits that's what that circle is, 80% of their profits come from heavy adult users. And how do you become a heavy adult user? You start as a young person. And then you can pour that into lobbying efforts. So to this day, the tobacco companies have heavy lobbying efforts. And similarly with marijuana, there's very heavy, sophisticated lobbying from the marijuana industry that kind of completes the circle and the cycle there. And so hopefully I put that up there. We can learn from our lesson with tobacco and not repeat that but with another substance. So if you don't believe me about the advertising and marketing to young people, you clearly see advertising marketing to young males. It's healthy, it's attractive, it's sexual, it's if this isn't marketing to children, I don't know what is. These are some of the products here in terms of, Pot Tarts or the brightly colored sodas over there with sweet flavors. And, those are things that my patients use. And these young kids love these products here. And the candy bars and the Chiba Chews are made here in Denver and pretty famous, kind of like Tootsie Roll, marijuana-infused products. This is more subtle advertising to children. Here, you see the cartoon character there, which you can't do with tobacco, or voluntarily. The tobacco companies don't have their Joe Camel cartoon anymore, which was so effective for advertising to young people. But you can have cartoon advertising with marijuana. Also, to me, this looks like video game font. And we also know from our history with tobacco that those kinds of discounts are especially appealing to youth. And it's been very effective here in Colorado. So let me just walk you through this slide here. On the y-axis up and down there, you have percent of people 12 and older who used marijuana in the last month. And you have Denver, the heart of marijuana commercialization, and you have it in the yellow, 2004, 2006, all the way to the, I'm colorblind, sorry, I think it's purple there, 2008, 2010. And you see significant, statistically and clinically significant increases in the past month prevalence of marijuana use among 12 and overs in Denver, while the United States as a whole has stayed kind of stable, 6.0 to 6.6%. And so people in Denver are using a lot more marijuana than they used to. Youth, this is a slide just 12 to 17-year-olds here in Colorado. And on the up-down axis there, you have the percent using marijuana in the last month, yes or no. And you have the different years there from 2005 all the way to 2010. Again, a significant increase there from 7.4 to 10.7%. So not only is everybody using more marijuana, but youth specifically are using more marijuana here. And so, I mean, that's kind of some bad news, and I don't want to end on the bad news. There's always hope and things we can do about this, and this is an organization that I'm a part of here, and specifically, we reject this false dichotomy of, at the bottom there, you have incarceration or you have legalization, right? We view those as two extremes, and we reject that false dichotomy. There's a third way about this. There's another approach to this in which we can create a safe place right here, because being involved in this whole marijuana issue has been very stressful. You get yelled at, screamed at, scientists, physicians normally don't want to be a part of that. That's not fun, right? The very people you want to be a part of this conversation won't be a part of it if there's a screaming match. So, you create a safe place to have a conversation and get some people together around this. And the organization we've started, co-founded by Representative Patrick Kennedy of Rhode Island and David Frum as a journalist. So you have the liberal and the conservative coming together, co-founding this organization, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, or SAM. And that's the website right there, Learn About SAM. And basically it's finding a third way about this. It's trying to prevent another big tobacco, like I told you about. Trying to prevent the commercialization of marijuana. It's one thing to decriminalize, depenalize, allow adults 21 and over to use it. It's quite another extreme now to commercialize it, advertise it, market it, have them have their First Amendment rights to do all that. It's kind of another extreme. We want to promote research into getting cannabis-based products to people who need them, and we can talk more about that. Accurate information. There are clear reform inequities. There are clear ethnic, racial disparities in drug arrests, and that should absolutely be dealt with. And we would claim you don't have to go to one extreme or the other to deal with that issue. Promote access to medications, possibly before final FDA approval. There are some legitimate cannabis-based medicines coming down the pike. Sativex is an oral spray that's already available in Canada and part of Europe, and it will be available in the United States in a year or two. And so to promote access to that medicine even before final FDA approval on a compassionate basis, we would support. And definitely promoting alternatives to just locking people up and really constructive approaches to helping people. So if anybody, likes a little bit of what I'm saying about this, check out the website there. Check it out on Facebook. Give us a like. And then there's also Denver Health and Hospital Authority plans. So there will be, hopefully, a little bit of marijuana tax money from the city. The Denver Health put forward a plan around that, kind of a 3-point plan to try to, really protect youth and offset some of the social costs I told you about. And so one, to do good monitoring of which direction we're going in terms of use and mental health problems and other issues that might be coming up. Number 2, to really provide accurate information and educate people about, risks associated with pregnancy, associated with driving, I mean, most of my patients tell me they feel it makes them a better driver, right? So we really need to get accurate information out there around that. And then early intervention, it's not just enough to educate, because 61% of Denver public high school seniors already are using marijuana. And of those, 1 in 6 goes on to develop marijuana abuse dependence, which means if you do the math, 10% of our high school seniors are going on to develop an addiction to marijuana, and then using at levels that possibly shave up to 8 points off their IQ. So it's a real problem. So we need to do early intervention, and we proposed to do a very evidence-based intervention in the school-based health clinics to try to reach those youth. And so that was our 3-point plan there. And with that, I'll just finish up and see if there are any questions or comments or concerns. And that's my website there that has some helpful information. It has a way to reach me. If people ever want to have a conversation about this or have any input, I'm always game for that. So thank you for your time and attention. And looks like we do have some questions and comments. Great.
Chris, thanks for being here. I actually have potentially 3 questions, but I warned you about one when we spoke earlier. I'm just curious your reaction to Dr. Sanjay Gupta's recent series on CNN about marijuana.
Right. So the question was about my reaction to Dr. Gupta's CNN show Weeds that came out on Sunday. And so I was interviewed for that, and I was, so I was grateful for the opportunity to get across some information that this is something that primarily affects youth and the developing adolescent brain, and we need to do something to protect youth. I think in general, though, I was personally disappointed with it. I felt like it was very heavy on the benefits of marijuana and very light on the risks associated with it. I felt like there was an implication that it's okay if you're an experienced marijuana user to drive after using marijuana, and I think that's not a good thing to imply. I think that there was also the implication that marijuana use could make you more creative. And so there was, that's an N of 1. That's one person's story that we heard. And I really would have preferred to have some very rigorous science in there, an N of 1,000, some of the studies that I showed you, as opposed to an N of 1 personal story. So I felt it was a little skewed that way, and I was personally disappointed about that.
Doctor, thank you for coming. I'm to your right.
Oh, sorry.
We know that significant tax dollars will be generated from marijuana sales. Do you have any estimate of the amount of that tax revenue? And could there be a citizen initiative to require those tax dollars which are generated to be used for education, especially targeted at youth?
Right. It's a great question. So any estimate of the tax dollars that will come in and how those will be spent, and specifically if they can target youth. So it looks like most areas of Colorado are not allowing the commercialization of marijuana. Boulder, Denver specifically allowing it. The estimate is that, the conservative estimate is that in Denver it will be a $120 million business. So it will raise whatever percent of the taxes. The taxes going forward is a 5% tax, I believe, in Denver City, and that needs to be, however, approved by voters in November because of Tabor. So it's possible we won't see tax money, and in fact, the medical marijuana system was $5 million shortfall in regulation. Regulation is quite expensive. It pays, with alcohol and tobacco, tobacco taxes pay for 1/10 of their actual social costs. So I don't think we're going to recoup what we are going to spend. But so conservatively, $120 million, and depending what we tax, if it's at 5%, I guess you can do the math there. And it's the higher end of what the business could be is $240 million. So anywhere from that. And then I think your second point is excellent, because with tobacco we have a history of there's a lot of pressure to take the tobacco money and spend it for other very worthy projects, but roads and things like that, but that have nothing to do with health or addiction or youth. So I think that's a great, at least in my point, I think it's a great point that we need to do whatever we can to try to make sure that these dollars go towards youth and, mental health, addiction, those types of resources to really offset the costs that will be incurred.
Dr. Thurston, on this side, please.
Dr. Thurston, thank you. What do you think we can learn from what happened with big tobacco and also the alcohol industry in regard to education, advertising, and then also prevention?
Right. The question is, what can we learn about big tobacco and alcohol in terms of youth and education prevention? And one thing, too, going back to your point, I want to, and it's related here as well, in that according to Amendment 64 in our state constitution, some of the money raised from marijuana taxes has to go to school construction, not education. So it's kind of a fine detail on that. But if there is any money that comes to the state from that, it has to go towards construction as opposed to actual education-related issues. So it's a fine detail. But I think there's a lot we can learn in terms of prevention of alcohol and tobacco. The one thing I think that we have learned is however much something's commercialized is how much youth will use it. So the Surgeon General in their 2012 report on tobacco smoking concluded that cigarette advertising causes, not associated with or correlates with or whatever, but causes youth initiation to smoking. And so the more that something is advertised, marketed, the more that the cigarette package is, brightly colored and has its own advertising on it, the more you have coupons, for Valentine's Day, get a free whatever, the more it gets used. So I think there's that. I think with the plan, also related to the Denver Health Plan with education, is what we've learned is that we need to come up with youth-oriented messaging. So the plan, if we get some of the marijuana tax money, is to have focus groups of youth and see what message resonates with them. And it's probably not going to be something along the lines of, don't you know your IQ is going to go down, or something like that, right? When Denver Health did these focus groups with youth with respect to tobacco, the message that resonated with youth was, who's smoking who? So it was something along the lines of, look at all these, older executives making a ton of money off of your tobacco use and your ill health. So that was kind of the message. So to really involve youth in the messaging around that.
Dr. Chris, I'm right over here.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for being here and thanks for sharing. I think maybe, I don't know if I'm alone in my naivete, but when medical marijuana came along, it was, here's something that can actually help people have cancer or
right.
have problems, and it's a good thing. You're standing up here giving us statistical information that there's a problem here.
Right.
Is this like something, did we open Pandora's box?
Right. I think it's a great question. So I think the Institute of Medicine released its report in 1999 on medical marijuana, and I think it was a good report that there is a role for compassionate use of it for end-of-life issues. But what's happened now is that in Colorado, at one point we had 3% of our 3.5% of our adult population had a medical marijuana card. And if you look at the statistics around that, it was very heavily skewed towards young males. And the most common reason for, 1 to 3% at any time, 1 to 3% of those medical marijuana patients had cancer. 1 to 3% had HIV, depending on the year. So the vast majority ended up being these young males who were reporting pain, and pain is very subjective. I have a lot of patients with their medical marijuana card, and depression is a very painful condition, or anxiety is a very, insomnia, not being able to sleep is very painful. And so it's very subjective that way. So I think with everything we do in medicine and probably public health and beyond, there's risk and benefit. right? And you have to weigh the risk and benefit. And it's my personal opinion that the risk that we've incurred with what we're doing is really outweighing the benefit of the people who truly, you know, with end-stage cancer and other conditions who could really benefit from it. Yes.
Hi. I wanted to ask you if any research had been done about the loss of IQ in smokers, so as to compare that to the loss of IQ in marijuana smokers.
Right. It's a great question. So any research on the loss of IQ with smokers to compare that to marijuana smokers. So I'm not aware of any evidence that adolescent exposure to tobacco causes decrease in IQ, or is associated with predicts decrease in IQ. Adolescent exposure to tobacco confers greater risk of becoming addicted to other substances later in life, but loss of IQ is not something that I've read about or seen. So it's a great question. All right, with that, I think I'll finish. Thank you very much. Thank you.
First, it looks like we had some unanswered questions, so do you have a few minutes afterwards to say? Excellent. And we always like to present our speakers with a gift. So this book is a history of the 100 years of service from Denver Rotary. So a great history of what our club has done. And then this is a baseball. Every year we have a great celebration for a baseball humanitarian. So this is from our Branch Rickey Award celebration coming up in November. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So next week we'll have Fred Fleming, Director of Special Services for the Denver Broncos. And this week, as you keep Rotary in your hearts, remember to leverage Mark Donovan's team with your new members, sell some peaches, and sign up for a really fun picnic. Have a great week. We're adjourned.